Hi, I'm Shiv.
And I'm Chitra.
We are the co-hosts of this show, Software People Stories.
We're happy to bring you stories of people associated with software as makers or consumers.
In every episode, we talk to people on their own personal and professional journeys.
Their interests and approach to work and life in a free-flowing conversational format. We hope that you will be able to draw your inspiration from their experiences and insights.
These podcasts are made possible by PM Power Consulting, who have helped individuals, teams, and organizations on their delivery excellence journeys. Welcome to this edition of the Software People Stories. My guest today is Ramkumar Venkatesan, who is the Vice President of Technology at MiQ Digital. In this conversation, Ramkumar talks about getting into software to have greater flexibility in terms of choosing companies to join, the qualities he looks for when hiring, and what does empathy for users mean for backend teams. How to effectively organize teams that produce microservices and consume microservices, evolving safety nets for development practices as an organization grows, and from his own experience, the importance of being adaptable in one's career progression. And finally, talk about handling stress at work and the future of software as a career. Listen on. Hello, Ram. Welcome to this episode of the Software People Stories. I'm really happy to have you as a guest and share your story, with our listeners. We can start with a brief introduction on how you got into IT and maybe background and anything else that you may want to share and your quick career trajectory.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Shiv, for having me on your podcast. Glad to be here. And I'm Ramkumar. I currently head the technology team at MiQ Digital. I think your question, how would I get into software? So when I started my career a couple of decades back, software was in its very nascent stages in India. Still, I think the opportunities for software were more than the hardware. I did my graduation in EEE. And typically the opportunities that we had for EEE engineers was to sort of get into some of the government organizations in electric, or since software was just starting out, get into that. And I always wanted to sort of have the flexibility to sort of maybe move around the world, move around cities. And I felt the software industry provided that. And so I went for my higher education in US, but I always wanted to come back to India. And at that time, the number of opportunities in software were more. So I thought I'll sort of increase my likelihood of returning to India if I went into software versus the hardware. And even I think after 20 years, even now, I think the majority of positions available are more in software than hardware. Like, it's changed significantly. Now we have the big Intels and the Qualcomm, Motorola, etc. here, but still I think vast majority is in software. So that's how I got into software, to have more flexibility for myself. And I think for me, I was able to express myself more. I think this is again my personal opinion, in software much more quickly than in hardware. And I felt another reason to be in software.
Yeah, that's interesting. So other than this, if you had a choice, would you have continued in hardware or explored more in hardware?
Yeah, the second reason that I said that software helped me to put things into practice much more quickly. That is again my perception. So although my bachelor's was in EEE, I did my master's and I actually enjoyed that more. And I think I did even better there in the software.
Okay, then I'll probably come back to your thoughts on IoT, where hardware is also becoming more and more software.
Yeah. Incidentally, in my previous company, we started working on IoT. Project was an IoT, how to do predictive analysis on when the device should be ideally maintained before it actually breaks down, what is the optimal time to maintain, etc. And it was a software company. We had nothing to do with hardware. And I think that's sort of becoming I think maybe the lines are getting blurred. I know some IoT companies which do sort of both, and traditionally it might have been much more separate. Yeah, I think not only IoT, right? I think even networking that we know, like I think now it's becoming software-defined networking is becoming a much bigger market sort of than the traditional networking, and I think Cisco, etc., are also making those transitions.
So were you also working in the US, or after graduation you just came back here?
I worked there in Oracle right after my graduation. So I worked in different teams in Oracle, from first line in supply chain applications, the ERP applications, then in the Oracle database team. For 11 years I was there, yeah.
Okay. So how do you find the transition from, say, the applications to a database team, which is probably more of an infrastructure or a backend?
Yeah, I think that was my very, very early stages of the career, and that was a sort of a change that I wanted to do. But in hindsight, that is one of the things that actually doesn't maybe make that much of a difference. The reason when I went into that, and today also I see a lot of people having those preferences. Right? The reason I went into that at that point, I thought that I wanted to code in data structures and algorithms, and the database team was going to be more likely to provide me an opportunity. But now, after 2 decades, I feel that I think it's not that big a factor. I think every software, every product, every company has great opportunities to do great work. So yeah, I think in hindsight, that's been a big learning for me. And one of my colleagues used to say that at the end, it's all logic, right? He used to say at the end, it's just if then else. And whatever thing that we are working on, whatever software that we're working on. And that perspective has also helped me sort of hire people also, right? Rather than look for specific things, have they done backend, or have they done this particular thing on this database, or etc. Look for more sort of broad logical thinking and ability to learn, or adaptability. I think what is there 5 years back won't be there now, and again, what is there now won't be there 5 years from now. Hadoop, which is big 5 years back, is sort of getting less traction now. Like Spark is getting much more prevalent now, and we at current MiQ company as well are on the journey to transition. So I think it helped me to adapt to the newer, different technology, different product and all. But I think that ability of adaptability was more important than the sort of the actual underlying technology or algorithms.
Okay. So from your experience, what would be your advice for someone who wants to, let's say, switch from applications to either backend or systems, or vice versa? Are there things that they need to unlearn when they move, in addition to being adaptable?
Yeah, I remember my manager's advice when I had this conversation with him about moving. He was my manager in the application division. So he sort of asked me to make the choice, right? So he said, yeah, you can work on data structure algorithms 24/7. Look at whether that is what you will enjoy, or do you like solutioning, right? Coming up with products that solve customer problems, and would you be enjoying that? So at that time, I did say I would like to do both. That was the easy answer. But I think that distinction is going to be there. Right? If you're in the back end, you're going to look at a lot of performance and high availability, sort of a lot of the those kinds of non-functional requirements, and you have to have a liking for that. And if you're in the application, you're building great user experiences. You probably have to innovate much more faster, do quick prototypes, take it to the market, analyze the customer feedback and all that. So I think maybe depending on the people's preference, I think they can choose that. Although I think it's not a black or white, right? Both needs both types of things. Even with the backend, you need to understand the customer requirements, and even at the front end, you need to be caring about non-functional requirements. So yeah, I think it depends on the person's preference.
Yeah, that's interesting, Ram. But the empathy for the user that we normally say whenever you're building something, understanding what they want or how it is going to be used, is that more when you do applications, or even when you are creating backend or system software? How do you get that, or how do you understand the usage scenarios?
Okay. I think that it's normally perceived as empathy for users are more in the application, right? And less so at the back end. But I don't think it needs to be that way, or it should be that way, right? So the customer of the backend services are the application teams. And the empathy for that user needs to be there. And I think the end user's empathy has to be conveyed back to the sort of the backend teams, right? And we also have these things happening day in, day out, and thing, right? Like maybe scaling system to meet 10x requirement or 100x requirement. Typically, it comes to the backend, and empathy for the user has to be there, right? If we say that we are able to do only so much response time, and beyond that we are not able to, or it's going to take time, it's going to affect the end application. So the end application is sum total of everything put together. So I think we definitely need the empathy of the user to be across the board and find ways to make that happen.
Yeah, it's true. The trigger for my question was that in some coaching situations, what I've come across is that when you're talking about an application and talking about business users, right from their language or how they use the software or what problems they're trying to solve is a little different, and there has to be a kind of a bridge or an understanding of that. The second aspect is that many times the tech leads or architects have fairly strong views in terms of how something should be done, at least some of them. And when your users are also other technical people, there are some conflicts that come up in terms of why I will not do something or why it cannot be done and stuff like that. So when I meant empathy, it was more about the consumers who are also probably other developers, and understanding that their needs could also be different, and how do we do this. So have you come across any such situations in your teams?
Yeah, so I think empathy for the end customer is slightly easier, and it's also stressed out a lot. So many people do it or have to do it, and they are paying customers, right? So that also makes that relationship so much easier. They're going to sort of cancel the deal, and if you're not going to make your product usable according to their expectations. But when it comes to maybe backend versus, as you said, the other developers, right? So we are in a microservice world. Day in, day out, we are churning out microservices. And there, maybe the contract becomes a little bit more negotiable, where maybe difference of opinions are, there's no clear paying customer out there who's going to call the shots, right? So I think there it's more difficult, but it's essential there as well. I've seen, I didn't want to specifically take that company name. They are an API company. So their entire product is an API.
Okay.
And how much they make it easy to onboard that API. They actually call it out on their company's sort of blog, saying that within 15 minutes, you'll be able to take our API and integrate it into your product. And,
nice.
And their founders used to go to the customer sites. And if they are not able to integrate, they'll actually sit and integrate. So they even say how much documentation of the API is going to be important. That was a very revealing thing, saying that how much importance they are giving to APIs and technical documentation. And they've even called out error codes being how important thing for the product. And I think error codes and all also, right? Typically it comes from the backend systems. So I think, empathy for the customer is extremely important. I'd like to maybe give one more example, like in Oracle, as part of the Real Application Clusters team, the flagship products of Oracle, the RAC database. So there, I remember our VP putting in a very, very senior fellow of I think IBM. He had joined Oracle in charge of Oracle error messages. Because we were sort of losing millions of dollars due to insufficient or incorrect error messages, leading to support costs. So that had sort of taught me the importance of even how important error messages was, and having empathy for the customer. When he's stuck at a problem, you need to tell him what is the problem, what did you do wrong, what exactly you need to do by yourself. And I think the same empathy we bring into our, even if it's internal teams, building microservices and consuming each other's thing, I think it'll go a long way.
I want to take that thread on microservices and the empathy and the responsiveness and all that. You've probably seen both the more traditional ways of development and also the newer agile ways of development. When you have a lot of moving pieces, do you think the traditional way may be better because there is more control and more coordination? Or what has been your formula for balancing the need for a quick adaptability and to make sure that the larger orchestration also performs well?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, right? There are advantages in the earlier model, and Fortune 500 companies have been coming out of that earlier model. And now all of us are sort of adopting microservices as well as Agile. There are advantages here as well, right? But I think we have to find the right balance for the sort of right company, and the company might be in different stages of evolution. The engineers again might be in different stages of experience and maturity. So we have to sort of adapt to that, right? So, and we ourselves in our company have done that. I think 2 years back when we started the microservices, originally we had a very monolithic architecture. We moved to microservices, and we had completely made capabilities as sort of separate teams, and then applications on top of these capabilities were separate teams. So I think what happened was the roadmaps of the capabilities teams were a little bit sort of out of tune with the applications roadmap. So then we reorganized the teams into consumers and producers of microservices, and into different pillars. So this gave us the ability to be much more in sync with the apps teams and the microservice teams. Not that only within the pillars the capabilities will be used, but majority of their use cases will going to be within the pillar, but it'll still be built in a generic way. So I think we found sort of the right balance between pure capabilities and apps versus groups of applications and capabilities having sort of a shared vision, a shared roadmap.
That's interesting because you already had a platform that was in production, and then slowly you moved from monolithic to microservices. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how was that change handled from the internal technical side? And for the users, was there any impact on that?
Yeah. So from the technical side, basically we sort of came up with the overall architecture of what are the ways, common things that can be made into microservices, and form teams around that. So they started building that, and the applications using them continue to adopt these microservices as per their roadmap. Right? So they prioritized breaking up their application into microservices over several quarters. So there was no impact to the users. And underneath the covers, we are sort of replacing the monolith with, and even portions of the monolith with the...
So how was testing handled in this scenario? Probably for some time you had both versions of code running, and probably some consuming your microservices and some still connecting to the monolith.
Yeah. So we have end-to-end testing, like from the application using Selenium, and then we have API testing for the microservices themselves, right? So the end-to-end testing continues, and they have to work irrespective of the underlying architecture. And the API testing is ramped up for the microservices. So, and then now we've also added the sort of contract testing, where the consumer or the application gives a test suite to the microservice team to run before they put their things into production, right? So we ensure that the downstream apps are not sort of broken, right? So our end-to-end app testing is helping make sure the transitions are working fine. And the API testing helps us ensure the quality of the APIs themselves.
Okay. Also, in the last 2 years, your team has also grown. And you did mention that you look for certain qualities when you're hiring. So how was that baked into the strategy of transforming your whole platform?
Yeah. So I think like today, technology and the soft skills both are sort of extremely important. And as I think I was commenting earlier, technology is going to change, right? By the time we hire, and by the time it's like sort of 5 years, technology has changed. So we do look for people who are energetic and willing to learn new things, who sort of see change as an opportunity to learn. And we look for those characteristics. We've done interview sort of training for all our interviewers as well to sort of focus on these aspects. Our evaluation also has been sort of changed into all these things, right? So we have separate sections to evaluate the soft skills, the values that our company has, and how their personal values also are sort of aligned to that. And another thing, part of the scaling, this is part of getting the right people into the team. When we were much smaller, people used to be able to communicate in different ways. They knew each other and they could just get things done. Right? As we scale, when newer people are coming, they don't have that sort of knowledge baked into that, which is sort of assumed by existing people. Okay. So we had to focus a lot on those initiatives of increasing, for example, our automation, right? So that when a new person is coming in and checking in code, there is this safety net of the automation test that is provided to them to be safe to make changes and see whether it works or not. We've increased sort of the level of the code reviews, etc., introduced the right tools, and also introduce all these tests to be run before pull request is merged. Okay. So again, it helps us onboard people and able to get them to start having impact much sooner. We've also had a documentation, some people call it documentation marathons, to put into writing a lot of the architecture design and all, right? Because as I said, we moved from the early architecture to the new architecture, a lot of changes in short periods of time. And so when new people come in, I think one person who joined recently actually told us that this is greatly helping me. The design doc that we had. So that was again proof that there is an ROI in these things. So all these things are helping scale people faster.
Yeah. So far we spoke about migrating or transforming the current platform. But in terms of the problem space itself, you do a lot of analytics. Yeah. And inherently, there is a lot of uncertainty in that or exploratory nature in terms of how even the algorithms kind of evolve. So how do your teams handle those?
This is one thing that we're still continuing to work on. So one of the things that we've introduced into the thing is some kind of A/B testing called as multi-arm bandit testing. So say in our domain, right, there are different strategies that can be, for the ad tech domain, different strategies that can be put to use to deliver the campaigns. And certain strategies may work better than other strategies. And we can hypothesize, we can say this should work better, etc. But there are thousands of campaigns running across the world at any point of time. And it's, I think, better to actually see the performance in production and then use that. So this, in one of our products, a couple of our products, we are using this algorithm to create sort of experiments of these strategies or the end result of the analytics, right? So after we've analyzed the data now, we come out with a recommendation of this is the strategy that works for this particular campaign. So we allocate different sort of budgets to this and experiment and see how it is working. And then that is fed back. Right? So all this is measured against the KPI of the campaign. And if the strategy which is helping meet us the KPI better sort of is given more weightage sort of going forward. And this is a cyclical feedback.
Okay. So in all this, how was your own transition from a techie, not necessarily over the career, to a leader?
Yeah, so I think I've as I said, I started off with applications and went to database. Then I went into software as a service in e-commerce. Then Informatica, which is a big data processing company. And then now in ad tech domain, MiQ Digital. So one of the things that I've considered important for myself is to keep being adaptable. Right? So that is something that I focus on and sort of challenge myself. And sort of each of these jobs has been sort of completely sort of different. Apps to infrastructure to SaaS to again enterprise and now to ad tech. And so since I've sort of consciously focused on that, right? So somewhat even maybe seeking that change to challenge myself in a newer domain, in newer technologies. And hence it's been sort of fairly smooth sailing once I've sort of accepted the challenge and wanted to actually make it happen. And so I think that's been my journey, right? Seeking out challenges, be adaptable, learn, keep learning.
So how do you handle stress at work?
So I think stress at work is, I think, becoming sort of more and more common and prevalent. And I think when I started off, I hadn't heard that much of stress at work. Maybe I was unaware, or maybe, and I think internet was also, I think, coming around that time. Maybe now we are aware of this more. I don't know whether it was there and not available to be shared with people. But now definitely people are talking more and more of stress at work. We at company have a program to sort of help people. How I think best to So I think you introduced to me the term of SQ, if I remember right? IQ,
mindfulness,
EQ, EQ and SQ, which is, I think, the spiritual quotient, right? So I, for the past maybe 4 or 5 years, I've been spending more time on that. So that is helping me tremendously to sort of again accept certain things, and I wouldn't say accept stress, but accept certain things at work, right? Whether it's conflicts or whether it is deadlines, and then sort of work towards that. And I think acceptance, once that is there, again, friction, which causes stress, doesn't seem to be happening as much. I don't say it's totally absent for me, but able to, I think, manage it quite well with that.
That's nice. Because one question that I like to ask all our guests at the end is your advice for people who are considering getting into software or who are about to get into software as a career. One, the questions they have are, is there a future for software? Because everybody says that everything is going to be automated, and then what kind of a job will we have, etc. The second is, many of them see the software professionals putting in a lot of long hours, saying, would we have a life outside of office? So what would be your advice to them?
Okay. Yeah, I think definitely we need more people coming into software. A lot of opportunities, and a lot of interesting opportunities, right? Again, ability to express oneself much more quickly. I think it's probably the most changing industry, if I can maybe say that. I might be biased coming from a software industry, but relatively to all other functions, I think software sees the most change. So if people like that and they want to constantly learn, I think software is a great place to be in. Coming to the thing, right, whether automation is going to take over things, right? I'm thinking that these challenges are always going to be there, right? I think we had studied in when we were in school that when the railways came, people were afraid of that, and it's going to take over their jobs. When I think any change, right? When MNCs came into India, maybe the PSU employees were afraid that they'd take over their jobs, right? But I think that way I see even all the automation and all that as a different kind of competition that is coming. And since I firmly believe, I think this is again, I've seen a debate on LinkedIn as well. I think humans are sort of far superior because the software is created by us. I think, someone posted me some different thing posting by Elon Musk versus Ma. I think I subscribe to the thing that Jack Ma said, that humans create software. And so far, software hasn't created humans, and I don't think that's going to happen. So even if we automate things, there will be other opportunities that open up that the software developers can develop for. So and I think my take is that I don't think that is going to change anything for people who can continue to find new opportunities and develop software with it. I think the third thing about the long hours in software, etc. Right? So I do hear that a lot from software people, but I do see it a lot in other functions. For some reason, they don't talk about it that much. I've seen, I've worked with accountants, right, as part of my building thing. Some of my relatives are in the legal profession. And I think they spend, a lot more time as well. But so I think it's overall, I think everyone is really, really working more and more hard every day. And right, because everyone else is doing that, I think it becomes like the prisoner's dilemma. And if I don't, what happens? And so I don't think it's particular to software. So I think the general any work it's happening. And I think people should take a balanced outlook, right? So I do see that also starting to happen now. Now, even in India now that I think our per capita is going up and people are coming out of necessities to things that they want to have or even luxuries. Now people are able to have these choices. Right? One of my friend has put his son into a school which is not like a regular school. Right, so he's made this conscious choice of taking him out of the thing. So similar to that, I think people should make their choices, have time for everything, right? Have time for family, have time for hobbies and friends. And I keep telling my folks that if you work hard while you're working, off on weekends, or if you've taken a vacation, completely sort of switch off from work. Right. If there's a really, really emergency, someone will call you. You don't need to be sort of checking email or responding to Slack messages, etc. I think even if we do that, switch off after sort of putting in your full days of work, completely switch off and do other things, I think that stress will go away and you'll be able to better manage.
Yeah, that's very nice and reassuring on two counts. One, that there is still future in software and people can get into software, and there is life beyond software as well, even when you're in software.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that was a very interesting conversation, Ram. That's about all the time we have for today.
Sure.
So thanks a lot for taking the time and sharing your thoughts. And we haven't covered your hobbies and other things. Maybe that's for another day.
Sure. Thank you, Shiv. Very nice talking to you as well.
If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.
Please rate the show on Podchaser, Stitcher, iTunes, or any other podcast client that you find us on. Please also share our episodes with your friends and others in your network. If you or anyone you know would like to be featured on our show, do write to us at this email address: podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.